All right, good afternoon. Welcome to your Bring Me the News and Novak Weather Update. I'm Tom Novak, and yes, we're talking about heavy rain. There will be pockets of heavy rain over much of Minnesota now this afternoon and into this evening, so keep that in mind. And it looks like a steady heavy rain is going to be in the forecast here for southeastern Minnesota. I'm going to kind of put the area that I'm most concerned about for the most steady and heaviest rain. Basically stretches from the northeastern corner of Iowa north and east to near Menominee and Eau Claire, Wisconsin. That would go through the Rochester metro, so the extreme southeastern corner of Minnesota. Now, you can kind of see a dry area here over central Minnesota, stretching from southwest to northeast across the heart of Minnesota. I do expect this area to fill in with scattered thunderstorm activity. Okay, and some of this is going to be heavy, and some of it potentially even actually severe. I'm a little worried that some isolated severe storms may develop with this heating of the day, where there is still some sunshine as we get into this afternoon and evening, so please keep that in mind. But again, in general, the steadier, heavier rains are going to be here over southeastern corner of Minnesota, northeastern Iowa, and much of northwestern Wisconsin, in the areas that we had originally expected the heavy rains to be located. And you're also going to find that a front is located right here across the heart of Minnesota, and I'll get into that a little bit more here just a little bit. All right, here's Cristobal. This is the remnants of Cristobal now really hitting eastern Iowa hard and now surging north into southeastern Minnesota. And again, I'm expecting the moisture to be held right along the I-35W corridor on east. Okay, so that would be basically from the Twin Cities Metro, especially the eastern Twin Cities Metro on east. And some of the rain that develops this afternoon is likely going to be torrential or heavy in nature. You can see from this infrared satellite loop that we're getting some enhancement now to the clouds. That means the cloud tops are starting to cool over northeastern Iowa and portions of southeastern Minnesota. That likely means we can expect some intensifying storms. I don't expect them to be severe. Maybe an isolated severe storm in southeastern Minnesota and western Wisconsin, but mostly I'm expecting heavy rainfall. And then we'll have to watch for this portion of Minnesota right here for the development of scattered pockets of heavy thunderstorms with the heat of the day. And again, here's the Twin Cities Metro. So Twin Cities Metro kind of getting sandwiched in between a front to the west and Cristobal here to the southeast of the metro. So we'll have to see how that fills in later this afternoon with shower and thunderstorm development. Here are the current temperatures now across the northern portion of the United States, basically the upper Midwest and the Midwest and Great Lakes area. Welcome to October in the Gulf Coast, by the way. This is a Gulf Coast air mass that is over our region with dew points in the upper 60s and low 70s and temperatures in the lower 80s with, of course, here's Cristobal's moisture here over eastern Iowa and now southeastern Minnesota that is running or surging to the north and just a touch northeast. And then you can see the scattered activity over South Dakota that's likely going to continue to move east and northeast and then fill in as we get time. As we zoom in to the upper Midwest, again, where it's raining, no doubt it's a little bit cooler. They're in the 60s and low 70s over eastern Iowa. And then look at this this warm air, 82 in the Twin Cities here at mid-afternoon, and temperatures are 87 in St. Cloud. So there's definitely enough energy in the atmosphere here over central Minnesota to support at least some isolated severe storms later on today. And yes, there is a front located right in between Alexandria and St. Cloud, kind of right over the Brainerd area, where it's upper 60s and in mid-60s to the northwest of this front right here, and then we're in the 80s just to the southeast of this front. So a front, moisture coming up into this front, and some sunshine and heat is a great recipe for some scattered storms later on today across much of Minnesota. All right, here's this wind map. I love this wind map, by the way. And just to give you a geographic perspective, this is Minnesota right here, and here's the Twin Cities Metro. Right about here is the Twin Cities Metro. And look at this front depicted by the changing winds that are located just to the west of the Twin Cities Metro. So it is likely that this front is going to become a magnet for scattered thunderstorms later on this afternoon. And then here you can see Cristobal now wrapping up over the Midwest and throwing its moisture back to the north and back to the west across eastern Minnesota and Wisconsin. Just a beautiful picture of the winds across the United States, and two, no doubt, obvious low pressure areas, one over eastern Iowa here, and then another one over the Central Plains in Kansas and southern Nebraska. Just a beautiful wind field that we can observe this afternoon from this wind map that I encourage everybody to go to when you get a chance. Now, speaking of heavy rains, look at these rains across the northern half of Minnesota and the eastern Dakotas over this is the last 3 days, so basically since about Saturday morning. And I want you to really focus in on northwestern Minnesota. You think that they might be having some flooding issues up there? We have rain totals in excess of 5 to 6 inches over northwestern Minnesota. Widespread rains of 5 to 6 inches plus up there over the northwestern corner of the state. And then some heavier rains continue to extend back south and west into Nebraska. But no doubt this area of northwestern Minnesota needs to be watched for continued areas of flooding here over the next 24 to 48 hours. Of course, we've been fairly quiet from southern Minnesota on south into Iowa, but Cristobal's moisture is again starting to surge north into southeastern Minnesota and western Wisconsin, and I'm expecting a ton of precipitation to fall right in this area as we go through the next 12 to 24 hours, but definitely a lot of moisture over all of the upper Midwest and the Dakotas, the northern plains here over the last 3 to 4 days. Now, as we talk about future radar, here it is. I kind of like what this model guidance is doing. This is the Rapid Refresh version 4 guidance now that comes out at 7 in the morning, and here's what it has for precipitation as we get into mid to late afternoon. And look at this concentration of heavy rain from right around the Twin Cities Metro and the I-35W corridor on east into Wisconsin. Okay, so that would include the southeastern corner of Minnesota and much of southwestern and western Wisconsin. This is a heavy, prolonged period of rain. We're talking a period of about a good 4 to 6 hours worth of heavy, steady rains from about the southern and eastern Twin Cities Metro on south and east into Wisconsin. Okay, that area finally lifts to the northeast as we get into the middle portions of this evening. And then we worry about these thunderstorms. Now, again, it's pockets of thunderstorms, but I do think that some significant storm activity is going to develop early this evening, especially over the heart of Minnesota, basically from about Fairmont on northeast to near the St. Cloud area and then continuing northeast to the Brainerd Lakes area. So we'll have to watch those areas for some stronger thunderstorms this evening. Finally, as we go through the overnight hours and into tomorrow morning, the precipitation starts to pull off to the east, and we should dry out so that by tomorrow evening, late tomorrow afternoon and evening, a fresh northwest breeze takes over, and that's going to be the case, by the way, for about the next 3 to 5 days as we get a weather pattern shift to where we get more of a Canadian dry air mass that comes into play for the second half of this week and into this weekend. So a nice respite from the heavy rains as we get into that time period. Now, when we look at the total precipitation now here over the next 24 hours or so, again, you can see Cristobal's moisture now. By tomorrow morning, by 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, you'll see that Cristobal will have dropped significant rains over southeastern Minnesota and northeastern Iowa and much of west central and southwestern Wisconsin. There will be pockets of heavy rain in east central Minnesota and south central Minnesota, so kind of tough to give you an exact amount of rain over the Twin Cities. It's going to be scattered in activity. And then, of course, I was talking about that more intense line or band of storms that I'm expecting to develop over central Minnesota as we get into the early evening hours and into the mid-evening hours. That'll likely drop some pretty big rains even in central Minnesota. So all in all, I think most areas of the upper Midwest, most areas of Minnesota and certainly Wisconsin can expect significant rain over the next 24 hours, and it may be heavy in some areas. Areas may get 2 to 4 inches plus of rain if you get under some of these heavy thunderstorms that will lack much in the way of movement. So again, 35W corridor, which is right about here on east, that is where I'm expecting the steadiest, heaviest rains over the next 24 hours. and then scattered but heavy activity from about the Twin Cities metro on west and north throughout much of Minnesota for this later this afternoon and certainly this evening. All right, with that, I'm going to let you go. Thank you for joining this weather briefing from Bring Me the News and Novak Weather. Again, look forward to some dry weather as we not only get into Wednesday, but later this week and certainly this weekend. It should be a real nice, pleasant Canadian air mass to follow all of this rain. Have a great evening.